Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, another Miami Hurricanes spring practice check-in. And this has been a program that's been extremely exciting to talk about as spring practice has rolled on. Not only do you have really exciting newcomers to this program in the transfer portal, obviously headlined by quarterback Cam Ward, you also have a ton of young talent who we've talked extensively on the recruiting trail about now really emerging as guys heading into that 2024 season. It's no secret. I am extremely excited about this Hurricanes program heading into 2024. And this is kind of the point during spring practice where you really see guys put a stamp on what they're going to be heading into 2024. I want to talk about 5 names that have been really standing out for me over the last couple of practices. Excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the Miami Hurricane fans, whether we're talking spring practice check-ins, whether we're talking about this program on the recruiting trail, the consistent support you guys always show. That stuff means the world. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, the best part about doing this is learning from you guys in the comment section. Would love to hear some names that you're really kind of are standing out for you during these first couple weeks of spring practice. We'll chop it up down there. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with what sounds like kind of the star of spring practice for this Hurricanes program. That is early enrollee Elijah Lofton. And this excites me for a couple of different reasons. One, this was a position that we really want to see somebody emerge for in this Miami Hurricanes program heading into 2024. I've been extremely vocal that the tight end position for Miami just wasn't good enough in 2023, whether it was injuries, whether it was inexperience. You need more production from that tight end room, which I think is very talented. You just got to see it on the field. But more importantly, I think this is an offense that a tight end really can thrive in. You're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. Miami wants to run the football behind a very good offensive line. You think about that Michigan offense, getting their tight ends involved. I think this is a similar offense where you can see tight ends really thrive in this passing attack. And Elijah Lofton maybe could be that guy for Miami heading into 2024. Now, getting into Elijah Lofton, the player, him coming out of Bishop Gorman, I feel like a lot of people just forgot about Elijah Lofton. He commits to Miami, I believe, late spring of last year, never really takes any other visits, never really messes around. And so I think a lot of people just forgot about Elijah Lofton in that 2024 class. This is a hyper athletic tight end who, yes, a little bit on the shorter side, but is really a matchup nightmare in terms of how smooth of a mover he is. You turn on the film from his time at Bishop Gorman, he looks like a jumbo wide receiver. He is going to be a load for smaller defensive backs to work with, and certainly for linebackers, because Elijah Lofton's a guy that's going to really just run right by linebackers and bigger defenders trying to work on him. I think he is a matchup nightmare. The blocking was extremely impressive from the high school film. And you're even seeing Elijah Lofton get utilized in the backfield for this Hurricanes program. A lot of different ways you can use Elijah Lofton. I mean, he can be a road grader as a running back, but I think what's most intriguing is, can you use Elijah Lofton as a pass-catching threat out of the backfield? This is, in my mind, the ultimate chess piece on an offense that I am really excited about kind of emerging for this Hurricanes program over the last couple of weeks. Elijah Lofton, stock up on him. I'm keeping my eyes on Elijah Lofton over the next couple of weeks. Next one I want to go to, in a player that I feel like just kind of has been flying under the radar for this Hurricanes program. That is wide receiver Isaiah Horton. Now, when we did our last spring check-in, we talked about the development between Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo. And I said, make no mistake about it, you're probably looking at the best quarterback wide receiver duo, one of the best in the country going into next year with Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo. Obviously, Cam Ward loves to go to his slot receivers, going back to his time at Washington State. How does Xavier Restrepo continue to thrive in this Hurricanes offense? Excuse me. I think it is when you have a big-bodied wide receiver that safeties are going to have to respect vertically down the field. And it sounds like Isaiah Horton could be that guy. He's making a lot of plays in spring practice. He's a guy that, from an athletic profile, checks every single box that you want as that true boundary wide receiver. And what I'm saying is, is if Isaiah Horton can emerge as a wide receiver that really can strike fear into defenses attacking that deeper third with how good Cam Ward throws the deep ball. What is that going to do? That's going to open up for guys like Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George to work those short intermediate route trees, right? Xavier Restrepo, one of the best separators at that wide receiver position. Jacoby George, although inconsistent at times, is elite after the catch. If you have a wide receiver that can clear out those defenses and have to really respect a guy like Isaiah Horton on the boundary, attacking that deeper third, that's going to open up a lot of space for guys like Jacoby George and Xavier Restrepo. The way I look at this Hurricanes wide receiver room, you have your separator in Xavier Restrepo. You have your guy who's going to thrive after the catch, and a guy like Jacoby George. Potentially, there's some other younger wide receivers as well. You could throw in Ray Joseph, JoJo Trader. Who's going to be the wide receiver that emerges as that down the field threat? I think Isaiah Horton certainly could be one of those wide receivers. Now, going to the defensive side of the football, player that I really liked last year and kind of diving into the film of that Hurricanes defense last year, a lot of the conversation went to guys like Ruben Bain, went to guys like Leonard Taylor. Jared Harrison Hunt was phenomenal for the Hurricanes last year. He had 16 run stops on the year, 22 quarterback hurries. He is a versatile chess piece on that Hurricanes defensive line. And it sounds like guys like CJ Clark and Marley Cook, who we're going to talk about in just a little bit, are emerging as the inside of that defensive line. Jared Harrison Hunt, it sounds like, is getting some work out on the edge with Ruben Bain sitting out a few spring practices. I am extremely excited to see what the recipe is for this Hurricanes defensive line. We've gone over it extensively. There is about 8, 9, 10 guys that we feel really good about. Now the problem, not problem, but the kind of question is, how are all of these guys going to be utilized on the defensive line? Jared Harrison Hunt, potentially that guy that gives you that versatility, that you can play on the inside to give you a little pass rush juice on those third and longs. And then you can play him on the edge on those first and second downs, a guy that is an elite run stopper and can take on double teams. Jared Harrison Hunt, I think, flew under the radar last year, played some really good football. This is another name that I'm certainly keeping my eye on heading into 2024. Next guy I want to talk about is CJ Clark, who we've covered extensively coming out of the transfer portal as that kind of body that he is not going to be the game wrecker that a guy like Leonard Taylor was when he was playing his best football, or a guy like Ruben Bain was. But he's going to be a guy that lets everyone around him thrive. It sounds like he is kind of taken over that first line of the defensive line. Him and Marley Cook sound like they're probably going to be your two starters on the inside of that defensive line. CJ Clark emerging as that elite two-gapper that can eat up double teams and allow guys like Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor and Jared Harrison Hunt on the outside to really thrive is really exciting. More importantly, your linebackers. So you have an elite guy like CJ Clark up front taking on double teams. Your linebackers can get downhill. They can start getting more involved in the run game. CJ Clark emerging as a guy on the inside of that Hurricanes defensive line. Very, very important. Last position I want to talk about. We talked about Jedias Richard last week. How about Robert Stafford, who I think is a really interesting prospect for the Hurricanes coming out of that 2023 class, and hyper athlete. I think the question about Robert Stafford was, all right, he's making that transition from wide receiver to cornerback. Didn't see a ton of him as a true freshman. We need Hurricanes to emerge and that cornerback room, right? That's probably, if there's one question about this depth chart, it is in the back end of that Hurricanes defense. Robert Stafford sounds like he's coming along. And what excites me the most about him is Robert Stafford was a guy that we were really excited about in terms of the athletic profile that he had. I think the question was, all right, how quickly can he make that transition from wide receiver to cornerback? And if that transition is a little bit expedited and he's a guy that the Hurricanes can maybe rely on in that 2024 year, you start to feel better about what the Hurricanes have in that secondary room. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Miami still goes to the transfer portal to add a cornerback or two, because, again, you're young there, right? Robert Stafford, it's youthful. It's talented, but it's young. You might want a more veteran at that cornerback room. But Robert Stafford sounding like potentially emerging as a guy the Hurricanes can trust, I think, is massive. And you look at what you're hearing from spring practice, it sounds like it's a lot of good on good, which if you're a Hurricanes fan, that's got to fire you up, right? If Cam Ward is making some high level throws to guys like Jacoby George and Isaiah Horton down the field where you have good coverage, but it's just too good of a throw, too good of a catch. That's what you want to hear from spring practice, right? You don't want to hear that your cornerbacks are just getting cooked. It doesn't sound like that's happening. It sounds like the offense is having some good practices, but it sounds like it's good on good. That cornerback room will continue to talk about. Robert Stafford making some moves up the depth chart is certainly interesting for me. Those are the 5 players I wanted to come on, talk about from what we've been hearing the last spring practices. Appreciate y'all rocking with the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.